Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Today we have Casey Schlaegle, and I hope I'm not butchering your name. He is the president of Schlaegle Design Build up in Pittsburgh, or is it outskirts of Pittsburgh or in Pittsburgh proper?
We're in Pittsburgh, in the city limits.
Okay, awesome. Great. And so today we're going to talk about Casey, his background. We were actually just discussing, he's got some very common in the millwork industry headaches happening today with some CNC issues, and just see where the conversation goes. Thanks for joining us, Casey. And if you don't mind, I think it'd be great if we start with just a little bit about your background, how you got started in the industry and your path to millwork.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I love the podcast. I listen to it as much as I can.
Thank you.
Another podcast. Yeah, of course. And it seems like Pittsburgh has a monopoly of episodes at this point. I think Yinzers, we call ourselves, that have been on the podcast. Which, great. Keep it coming. We got a lot of smart people here, apparently.
Definitely.
My background goes back to my upbringing. I grew up in an architectural wood shop. My father was partner and a competitor of ours, now a competitor of ours. You might know them. It's Dustin, I think, is the owner.
Okay. Yeah, Giffen.
And according partners until 2000. So my childhood, that was 14 years of my life that I spent in and out of the shop, and my dad spent a lot of time working and a lot of exposure to it at that point. They parted ways. I, at that point, said, Dad, what am I going to do? I wanted to take over that company. He said, sorry, but you're going to have to start your own. And fast forward, that's where I'm at. But it took a little bit to get here. Graduated high school, went to school at the University of Pittsburgh for architecture, graduated in 4.5 years, got a job as an intern architect for a local guy. Worked that for about 11 months, got furloughed from there. They lost a big job and had to cut some people, and lowest man on the totem pole. 2 of us went. And that was probably one of the better things that happened to me in my life. From there, I joined the Carpenters Union, went through an apprenticeship. About 1.5 years in, I went to the apprenticeship director and I said, hey, I want to start a business. And he said, go for it. He said, we will support you in any way we can. Come to class as much as you can. We'll help shepherd you through this. And that was 2011, starting my company in my basement, small little, 1,500 square foot house, full basement, just cabinet shop. I had a miter saw, a hand router, table saw, and just started putting counters and boxes together. Over the years, we've grown, we've gone up, we've gone down, but in the past 5 years, it's been up. The pandemic definitely put a damper on us for a little bit. And we're full steam ahead now. So we're in our 12th year of business. I know I jumped probably through a few arrows there quickly. We can always go back, but we're in our 12th year of business right now, 25 employees, we've doubled our revenue in the past year. And we've seen a lot of growth as far as sales, but a lot of academic growth, because one of my big things is you can't grow a company without growing your people. And I've always been a culture guy, and it's just been getting better and better from where it was just hey, let's make a place that is enjoyable and people want to go to. Let's really dial in what our culture actually is. And we're a safe workspace. We have accountability. We have academic growth, continuous improvement, and we're process driven. And that's where our culture has gone at this point. My job at this point, I've pretty much grown into a full CEO role where I have 5 direct reports right now that I meet with weekly for one-on-ones. And I work on growing them. My daily tasks are pretty varied, but they're pretty high level. I work on the business more than I work in the business.
Awesome. That covers a lot of ground, and honestly, a lot of topics that we've talked about with past guests that I think is very interesting. Before we jump out of your background, though, I'm interested. I myself went to school for architecture as well. At the time I went there, I thought I wanted to be an architect at the time. And through the course of my 4 years in architecture school very solidly learned that I did not actually want to be an architect. You, though, grew up with a dad in the industry in millwork and obviously chose to go to school for architecture. Was that a strategic decision? Did you actually want to be an architect, or it sounds like you knew you wanted to come back to the industry? Talk about a little bit about that.
I think I was about 18 years old and very naive and ignorant. I love design. I still love design. It's just, I do a different type of design these days. It's more process oriented. So I did want to be an architect. I viewed it as very romantic.
Yeah.
And once I got working in the field, it was romantic. I was doing details and it wasn't that cool. So like I said, it was a blessing in disguise getting furloughed from that job.
Right.
So in my mind, I knew that I wanted to come back to it. I just wasn't mature enough at 18 years old. It's no 18-year-old really can pick what they want to do for the rest of their life. That's why people are changing their careers 5 and 6 times these days.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's very similar. I went in, I wanted to build houses and design houses is what I thought. And people told me, oh, you're good at math, you're good at art, you're good at all these things, you'd make a great architect. And I said, oh, that makes sense. Sure. And I loved architecture, but I liked seeing the fruits of my labor. And when I worked as an intern, everything I drew, I really didn't see anything come out of the ground. And when you start working, like I worked in a small office, you're not working on these projects where you're heavily influencing design. It's just half your clients just hire you because the building department tells them they have to have a sign off by an architect. A lot of it's remodel, and it's a lot of, hey, we saw this, we want that somebody else design, we want you to make it. And it's actually eats you up inside. Millwork, I found I loved that. And very early on, I parlayed my architecture drafting skills to being a drafter for a millwork company. But what I love about millwork is that everything that we design, we build, we work on is functional, something that like serves a purpose, that very quickly you see the results of that. And it's a much more, even though we have long-term projects, it's very shorter life cycle than a whole building. I think I was coming out of architecture school was very jaded of, okay, this isn't what I'm doing now. But I think the longer I've been out, the more I realized things that I am using from that degree. I don't know if you find the same. For me, I learned about the design process. A lot of people think you learn technical stuff in architecture school, and it's very much, especially in undergrad, not the case. You learn it through practice, but in school, they're teaching you the process of design. And really, what I've gained from that is how to help problem solve. Clients come to you thinking that they know what they want, and they're saying, oh, can you help me make this? Here's a picture of what I want. And because they're trying to solve a problem, but they're not expressing the problem they're trying to solve to you, they're expressing what they think the solution is. And through the design process, you're helping uncover, hey, you're actually trying to solve this problem, and I actually know of some other ways that can solve it better than what you know is available. And I think a lot of that's what we do as millworkers is, even architects or interior designers might draw something. Hey, I want a reception desk that kind of does this. And we re-engineer that in a way that's better than what they knew possible. Are there any things like that you've leveraged? Obviously now in your CEO role, you mentioned you're very much flying at kind of that eagle eye level. What are those things that you've learned that you didn't really realize you're leveraging now from that education?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned math. Everyone thinks that architects are just like these math people, and maybe they are. That wasn't my experience, but I've always viewed my college experience as what it taught me was how to solve a problem, whether the problem is hitting a deadline, whether it is the whole problem is your degree.
Yeah.
I came out of the University of Pittsburgh with the ability to problem solve because it was the all-nighters, the 6-hour, what were they, design presentations.
Yeah.
All of that stuff was just, it was process, it was problem, and it was goal setting. My goal for every presentation was I wanted to be done 100% 6 hours before the presentation started, which is unheard of in design studios because everyone's working up into the final whistle. And that wasn't me. I was the one that was always done well in advance. And everyone's like, how did you do that? I was like, I wasn't partying while you guys were I was working on my projects, but it gave me really good time management skills. It was also a lot of like self-directed stuff. Running your own business, one of the hardest things about running a business is self-motivation. Like, yeah, I have 25 employees that rely on me to come to work, but there's some things that like I could just push off and not do, but that's not going to end well. So my college experience in the architecture program just taught me how to self-motivate.
Yeah.
And I did pretty well at it. But yeah, I always tell people the problem solving is something that Pitt taught me was just from start to finish. This is one just giant problem. Like life. That's how I look at life. Here's what I need to do. How am I going to get there? So it's starting with the end in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, diving into a little bit more about Schlaegle Design Build and the work that you guys do. Obviously, you guys are out of Pittsburgh. Describe a little bit of your client base, the type of projects you guys mostly focus on now, and how you guys execute those? What does your client base look like in the work you guys perform?
So we're Division 6 is what we do. So we're commercial, architectural woodwork, anything custom. What we excel at is the high quality finish and like tough jobs. That is where really well. The boxes, the hospital jobs. Yeah, we do them. I think everyone does them. It's not our favorite. We don't make a killing on them, but we like the high-end jobs because we have a really bulletproof process that we are able to execute and take on really challenging aspects and deliver them on time.
Awesome. And we started talking a little bit, you mentioned in your background, like you very much are now in a CEO role and you have a team below you that is much managing the work. But I imagine that wasn't always the case going from day one, 12 years ago to now. Can you talk a little bit about that path and what it took to get to where you're at now and why being where you're at now is so much more important than maybe the alternative of a micromanaging owner?
Yeah. So I think the firefighting is what kind of got to me to where I just needed to get away from that. But day one, I was doing design work. I was working with a GC in town that needed just some drawings done. They didn't need to be stamped or anything because I'm not a registered architect. And so I would just do some design work. And then that kind of went into doing whatever, hence the design build name. So I would do a small interior renovation and then go and build the casework for it. And it was just becoming a bear, trying to do all of that at the same time, bid it, invoice it, build it, everything. But that was the first few years. I think our first year we had about $30,000 in sales, not enough to do much with, but then that kind of grew exponentially, but it had to. One of the things I did focus on early on was process and systems. Coming out of the architecture firm, one thing I got from there was how organized they are and how organized I had to be. Like I would probably put my file system on my server up against anybody's because of how organized it is. Some employees have actually accused it of being too organized. You probably shouldn't be here then if you think that's the case.
Yeah.
But the first few years it was a struggle. It was a grind. It was day and night work. And so from my basement, I rented a small garage from that, and I just kept tools in there. From that small garage, I grew into another basement in a commercial building where it seemed great at first, but then we outgrew it so fast. So then we were in several spots in this chopped up old industrial building where it was damp and it was stinky and it was hard to get materials in and out. And then we moved into another space. And this is while building up our reputation with the different commercial GCs in town and picking up some steam. And then 2016, we hit a rough patch where we took on too much work. We didn't have the discipline. We didn't have the process. We just took on as much as we could. And our resources got spent and we hit a rough patch. We had to dial it back in and lay some people off and get it back together and got to like a group of, I think it was like 4 or 5 people that worked at the company at that point in time. And then we hired a really good estimator and that was our springboard into where we are now. Grew through those few years, pandemic hit, our revenue took a nosedive like a lot of people's did. And coming off that 2000 situation we had, I was just, come on, another thing, pandemic hit and I was the wind was taken out of my sails. But then it gave me some time to continue to work on process to where we are right now is the process machine.
Yep.
Our SOPs and our company wiki that I'm working on is really strong and people just continue to understand the importance of repeatable process. I'm sorry to keep saying that, but it's just, I beat it at everyone's head and we kind of align with our customers on that. they don't align with us culturally, we don't really have much, we don't want to have much to do with them.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. As you're talking, I'm honestly thinking introspectively, because there's not a lot of, from my experience, I haven't worked with a lot of people that came from an architectural background in millwork, even though we overlap a lot with architecture.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see a business owner. Do you feel that we talked about process, you talked about probably your work ethic in architecture school. It's very ingrained early on, all-nighters and studio projects. Do you think that there's something in your DNA as a company owner, as an entrepreneur, that is unique within this industry because of your background in architecture and your education?
I would say that has all of your experiences lead to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my upbringing as well has a lot to do with it. My father is somebody that has always been a culture guy. I think what he taught me early on, as far as how to treat your employees and how to motivate them and how to teach them as opposed to scold them, and nurture them and grow them into the employee you want to have, is something that is so deeply ingrained in me. And that was one of my values. It was never written down anywhere, but from day one, my value was create a company that people want to go to.
Yeah.
And we're still doing that to this day. We don't have hiring issues like everybody else has. I've never once said you can't get anyone to work. We have a great crew.
Yeah.
We attract and retain good talent throughout the years that we've been around. And the people that have left, it's for a reason. But architecture school definitely was a huge part of that. But that was just building on who I was. And I continue to grow in those ways.
So drilling into that a little bit more, talking about culture and your background, because obviously your dad is an industry guy, right? He spent an entire career in this industry, right? Working at a large shop. I'm just speaking from my experience, I've spent most of my experience in the Southeast, but had a lot of former union guys, former carpenter union guys coming from the Northeast that now are working in Southern shops. But generally, this industry is very like the opposite of what you described. Very culture last, very everybody. Like I remember even as an engineer constantly getting badgered and harassed and, hey, I didn't see you on Saturday. We were out here on Saturday. Oh, you're not working 60s or 70s. What's wrong with you? And on top of just the way, and I worked in food and beverage all through high school and college, which is also very much probably a further extreme of that, of the way managers and leadership treat employees. Is that your experience that you feel like as an owner? I don't know how much you interact with other business owners but do you feel like the way you are trying to go culture first is counter to the industry at large in millwork?
I would agree with you 100%. And then I would just say it doesn't have to be that way. There's totally a way to run your business, to elevate your people without having that like old school, do it my way, work. I hate the mantra work. What do they say? Work smarter, not harder. I think it's BS and not founded in anything. I agree with it, but I think it's just lackluster. It's just something people say, which they don't really know what that means. So yes, my answer is it doesn't have to be that way, nor should it be that way.
And I think a lot of people also probably take it to the other extreme and think when they hear this, oh, you're culture first, you're just super nice to everybody. Nobody gets let go. Like you just, whatever the employee wants. But I also heard you very clearly say, hey, I'm very process driven. And if you don't like my process or you don't like process in general, you're probably you don't belong here. And you've had people leave. So it doesn't sound like it's either or. It has to be, right?
Yeah, I would say some people could say maybe the inmates run the asylum. I could use that saying, but that's not true here. There's a ton of accountability, and people know I don't micromanage,
right?
But I do check in on things frequently. I mean, daily I look at different points in my company where I can basically gauge how everybody's playing together, and I address things every single day that are out of line.
Right.
I'm watching, and they want that. People want to be guided. They don't want to be floating.
Right.
That was my 2006 kind of mentality was, hey, you got a lot of autonomy here. Cool. That means I don't want to, to me, looking back, I don't want to manage you. So just do whatever you want and try to get it done. Now that's the polar opposite of where we are right now.
Right. So would you say like now, and you started this way saying, hey, I'm very much in a CEO's role. I have 5 direct reports. I'm investing in coaching them and being culture first. Like you're focused on developing your people, which I imagine means also giving them very honest, critical feedback, but in a constructive way. And as opposed to just, hey, no, you guys are doing a great job, do whatever you want. And you've been through, it sounds like, several drops in kind of business trials, right? You've been through, it sounds like 2016, 2020 with COVID. Are there things that you learned from that have continually refined and shaped this kind of path?
Yeah, it goes back to continuous improvement and accountability. My employees, I check in every week on their goals. We set company goals in December of last year. That was this third year that we've set company goals, just because we were a young company and you're just trying to get through the weeds. We were definitely in the weeds. We check in on them every single week so they know what they're working towards. They know what the company's working towards. They set goals that align with that. And so everybody's working towards the greater goal. And I also incentivized it this year with a profit sharing plan, which is the first time we've ever done that. So that really gets people's attention.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the 2016 was just, you can't give people, they need some autonomy, but they can't have full autonomy. Hey, this position is your project manager, whatever that means, just go sign contracts. No, that's not going to work.
Right.
Here's what the job actually is. My onboarding process also supports that for new hires. We have a training document that is very well defined on what their expectations are, how we're going to train them, how their shadowings go. And with that, they get a milestone document where it's everything in their job description is put on a 30, 60, 90 evaluation. And we evaluate that at 30, 60, 90. And usually a raise or something like that is tied to it. So my onboarding process works pretty well because you tie it to some money and you give them some motivation and they know what they're working towards. So 2016, 2020 downturns for us, they've helped give me time to work on that. 2020, all of our work dried up except for hospital work. And I said, okay, I need to work on something. So I started working on the business.
Awesome. Now, do you have a lot of people that come from other like companies or competitors in the industry? Or do you mostly have people that are coming, like that your company is their first experience in this industry?
Not too many people that come from competitors.
Okay.
Most of these people have worked for companies that are now defunct, or they were the GC side of things, or say our shop carpenters, they work for a kitchen dealer or something. And one of our selling points is we are a union shop. And if the union hall doesn't have people to give us, I'll go and put my own ads out there and bring people into the union. And a lot of people really have tried hard to get into it. And that's a good selling point for young, old, whatever. Let's get in the union. There's a lot of benefits to it. It's
right.
Good pay, good medical. And so they could have pretty diverse backgrounds.
Right. Okay. The reason I ask is obviously it's interesting when people have that experience, maybe from a different company in the millwork industry, and that it's very polar opposite to the way you're running your business, right? They're able to contrast cultures and the process and those types of things, I imagine.
Yeah, but they add a lot of value to it. They come and they like our culture, they enjoy it, but they can also add a different perspective on how to do things. I have an engineer that came from a competitor that he's added a lot of value to us based on what they do. And it's not like any of us really have like intellectual property. It's all the same stuff we're doing, but it's from perspective.
Yeah.
And the head engineer came from a defunct company that he was young and he basically turned into a rock star. Listen, you can't have him. Don't steal him.
Yeah.
He turned into a rock star within a year or two. But
Nice.
he had industry experience.
So we talked about a lot of stuff that I think maybe the listeners probably sounds like, hey, Casey's got it figured out. Everything's gravy. You're running this amazing business with amazing culture. You're experiencing huge growth. We talked about starting about winning your headache, but what problems are you working on now? What things are you working towards in the future aside from?
Yeah, that's number one right now, getting the vacuum pump fixed. Number two, I think the hardest thing I deal with right now on a day-to-day basis is educating my employees. It's finding the time, it's finding the structure, it's the appropriate trainings. I really respect their time because I don't want to bog them down with internal projects. So there's a fine balance, especially with how busy we are. But with our academic growth mindset, I really want to make sure they are moving their needles on their career progression. And it's hard for me to find a way to train them effectively.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that everybody struggles with is what does that look like? Because I think a lot of people go straight to, oh, we need training, we need classes, right? We need classroom setting. We need, which means taking significant time away from productive work to somehow in a classroom setting reproduce real life scenarios, which is how you learn. What are some of the ways that you feel like you've successfully incorporated or built kind of training? Like, what do you find the best ways that your people have learned so far?
One of our core value is lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
I am constantly learning. I'm reading and listening to books, podcasts, and I'm sharing that knowledge. There's tons of webinars out there that run the gamut. I think if you're not like listening to podcasts right now or attending webinars, you're really losing out because everybody can learn so much off the content that's out there. So that's one way we do it. We're energy customers, so like the energy forums or something that are really helpful for us and their summits. So I use I'm in a CDO peer group, and my coach has worked with my people in the past to help train them on what's going on in this company. He's trained them on the theory of constraints. We've done exercises together. He helps run our planning sessions, which are part education and part workshop. I think that's just a few. I think the more I learn, the more I pass on to my people, and I can see my people picking up the same stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. And a lot of that stuff you just described, I think a lot of people probably think, oh, we need to learn millwork. And I think that there's so much more to successfully running a millwork business than the wood, the product. Obviously, that's important. You need people that gain experience, but they gain that experience through doing, right? But everything we've talked about so far is external to that, right? Process, interpersonal relationships, those types of things, right?
Yeah, for sure. Aside from Verify and Field, my second favorite podcast is, what is it? It's an HVR one. Do you listen to HVR podcast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is IdeaCast, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I get a ton of really useful information from that. And I tell my people to listen to that because that's where the real value comes. How to do stuff, how to build cabinets. It's all the same. We all know that.
Yep.
But how to grow ourselves in our company is something we all need to work on.
Yep. Awesome. So talking a little bit more about going forward, you've grown pretty rapidly. It sounds like in 2016, you said you were down to maybe 4 people, and now you said you got 25. How, a little bit about onboarding people. You said in 2020, you really buckled down and spent some time developing an onboarding process. Where do you recruit from, and what does that look like? What things are you looking for and that maybe is unique to you guys?
Indeed is where we put our ads out there. I think what do we look for in people? That's a tough one. It's typically with somebody with millwork experience, but it's a cultural alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And I know these are buzzwords today, and I apologize, but it's somebody that can fit in here and wants to come, and they want to do good work every single day, and they want to grow with us, and they want to be a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we really look for, because we can work with that. Someone that's intelligent, and someone that wants to get better at their job every single day.
Right.
We do have a lot of fun here at work too. So you need to have a good sense of humor. Yeah. And some thick skin. But I think if I had a cultural fit would be the number one thing we look for, because they're just not going to work. The people that have told me we're too organized, they didn't fit into our culture either. And that's just something that doesn't work for us.
Yeah. It makes sense. And from that, so a lot of this is reading between the lines, because culture to a lot of people can mean a lot of different things, right? But like you said, there's a good example. Oh, if you're too organized, that is a sign of something bigger. Okay, that person is not comfortable with organization, right? They're not able to think in that way, which they probably have other skills that maybe fit a different role or different business. But I think that's something that a lot of people, especially that are newer managers, struggle with, is how to quantify that, how to evaluate those types of things, and how do we discern, like, hey, is this person a good fit, or is this person, because especially like my background managing mostly engineers, they're very analytical and everything needs to be black and white, right? Did they get this many points on their evaluation or this many points? And there are some things that are like the softer skills that you have to evaluate, but to find the people that fit the type of role, like you have to be able to somehow evaluate and make decisions on those kind of intangibles to some extent, right?
Yeah, that's probably tougher than anything you've asked me so far. Yeah, we look for people that kind of emerge as leaders, and that's where the real value comes in. And I always tell my people, like, be the leader you wish you had. I know I ripped that off of somebody. I forget who said that, but it's people that we can see that aren't just me, that want to help elevate everybody around them. And I think you can tell by just how they speak of themselves and others and their body language if they're going to fit. I don't know if that helps answer the question at all.
Yeah.
But you are right about engineers. They're very analytical, and we do need those people.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone needs them, but then it just tells us about where they're going to end up in the company. If they're going to rise to the top, are they going to be more leader material? Or are they going to, and there's nothing wrong with an engineer or a draftsman or a shop guy. It just helps us differentiate what their career path looks like.
Yeah. A lot of people put it, what is the right seat on the bus for that person? And that, I don't even know, that might even be from the goal or book as well. But okay, do we have, and there are different seats, there are different roles people need to fill, but the culture, I think, is what is cohesive about all of those people. And it's very hard to put into words and quantify. But you mentioned earlier, you have lead by example as one of your values, or what are some of the other ones, if you don't mind me asking?
So there's integrity. That's something that's basically doing the right thing when nobody's watching. That's something.
Yep.
Quality, we define that as meeting or exceeding your customers' expectations. We have internal and external customers. We don't just look at our client as our customer. It's estimating customer is project management. Are you meeting their expectations?
Yep.
Continuous improvement is another one of those that goes pretty deep in our organization. We use theory of constraints to help evaluate what to work on. Transparency, that's another thing. I'm very transparent with my employees on what's happening financially, what's happening in my life, what's happening with the company. I tell them, come ask me. I often just give up information to people voluntarily just because I want, that's just who I am.
Yep.
And then finally lead by example, like we were talking about.
Yeah. Awesome. No, that makes a lot of sense. And for people listening that, and this may have come up in previous episodes, but theory of constraints, I believe, originates from the book, The Goal. Mm-hmm. And so if you haven't read that, is it Eli Goldratt, I think? So if anybody's listening to this podcast, you're a great candidate to read that book. That is super valuable. I know if you're an energy user, you probably already have read it or heard it, but that's a lot of what we're talking about and what Casey's referencing here.
Oh, for sure. There's a graphic novel as well. And it's required reading for us here at this company. It's one of the first things that the 2-second lean. There's a few other that I just say, you got to read this before we even really start to talk or dig in on what's going to happen with you here.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. I know when I came into this, I know we're covering a lot of territory and jumping around a little bit, but I'm really honestly this is me being selfish and picking your brain, somebody with a similar background. I do want to touch on a little bit this dynamic we talked about with architecture and millwork. And this is just from my perspective, because I think that this is, I know that in our industry, there is a reputation that architects develop. And it's not just our industry, but in construction, right? And architects and engineers have their own, right? Everybody downstream from them love to make fun of architects. And so, and particularly in our industry, they'll draw design drawings, and a lot of times they will begin to have details of what is our ultimately millwork scope that just doesn't work or doesn't make sense. However, having been on the other side, you've worked in an architect's office, you went to school for architecture. I think there is a lot of misconception about what is an architect's role and what are they responsible for, what should they know. You touched on this a little bit. People think they do a lot of math. Architects, and we're talking about in the US here, just to clarify for everybody, but architects are not engineers, right? Engineers are a separate thing. And so when you talk about structural requirements, things go to a structural engineer for that. And you talk about HVAC, a lot of the things, right? Architects, though, in the US, especially very much in the commercial world, are essentially tasked with kind of managing the whole project and knowing just enough to be dangerous about all of those trades. And really what they're trying to do is get the design intent, which is another buzzword that people hate in our industry, but it's constantly used, right? Hey, that doesn't match the design intent. That really is it. Hey, we're trying to get to this result that we don't know the details. We're leaning on you guys as trade experts. And so I think what's unique though about millwork is so many of us come into this industry by accident that very few people see themselves as an expert at what we do, or can take what they do seriously enough to say, nope, this is what we should do. And I'm going to tell the architect or tell the GC or tell the client, hey, this is the best way to execute this. And I know you have a unique perspective on this, being that you named your business Design Build, which is very different than a lot of people are just see themselves as cabinet makers or see themselves as, I'm just going to do what they say. But I want to talk a little bit about that dynamic and get your thoughts on that of, hey, look, we are being tasked with taking that and saying, hey, here's how we can execute your design intent in a real way that it gives you better than what you are asking for.
Yeah, sure. So to clarify, I did do design build up front and just stuck with the name as the years went on. I did start talking to my marketing company about a rebrand that's more halfway down. So just want to set that record straight. But no, architects, I mean, they're always viewed as the enemy because they're easy to blame. Why not blame the person that is giving you poor quality from upstream? That's the easiest. But they have it tough too. They're trying to deal with clients that are often indecisive, hard to reach, all over. They could be traveling. And they also bid jobs like we do. So they're the lowest bidder most of the time. That's at least my understanding.
Yeah.
And they make things pretty. And that's their job, to provide enough detail to get a scope to us so at least we can price it. And then, like you said, use our expertise to build it. I often joke around saying we make rectangles in the cabinets because that's all they are on drawings, is just rectangles. So they definitely get a bad rap, but they need to be educated like us as well. Every architect we've brought through our shop they're wowed on the different materials, and the classic, we should use plywood for everything, right? Conversation comes up every single time, and it's, well, maybe for wall panels, no, that would be suicide, and it would be garbage within 3 months, depending where you're at. So they need to be educated as well, but we're all really busy.
Yeah.
Or we're in the low bid environment, we don't have time to go and do lunch and learn. Ideally, that would be great if we all went and helped and worked together and educated each other. I think they get it's an easy scapegoat, and that's where that comes from.
And I think the reason I want to drill into this, and one is something interesting to talk about that I think there's value in, but is I think that the side effect of that narrative in our industry specifically is that too often we as an industry just write off the architect as these ignorant and unreasonable people that can't be reasoned with and can't be educated, and they don't know what they're talking about, so why even try? But the reality is that they very much control our destiny as millworkers, whether we like it or not. And two, most of the time, these problems stem from them working with outdated information. 90% of the jobs are boilerplate specs that were written 20, 30 years ago, right? Or like that plywood dynamic, that's old information that is no longer true, but at one point it was considered to be the best advice. But I think what happens is too often millworkers feel like we don't have a leg to stand on, we don't have an ability to reason with them. I just had lunch yesterday with a friend in the industry, and we had done some work together where my team had done the drawings for approval, and the architect said, no, the specs call for laminate edge countertops. And we pushed back and said, no, you need to pick an edge band. This is a better product for what you're trying to get. But we had to educate this specific architect on, hey, we're not trying to be cheap. We're actually trying to give you a better product. And here's why this is what we want you to do. We're trying to help you. But it takes having that conversation and having that pushback. And I think too, if more millworkers did that, we would all benefit, because that architect is going to go work with another millworker on the next project, and they're going to remember that.
Yeah, that was it. I liked your comment about us being not too confident about our own expertise. I think that the more we can at least act like we know what we're doing, the more they'll believe us. And you're right. The edge banding thing that's a battle we fight from time to time on doors. We got laminate edges. Are you crazy? That's not a good product. No, but that makes a lot of sense. I would like to see people educate more and more, at least spend the time, because we should be working together.
Right.
Same thing with like GCs. Like there's no reason to try to be enemies with GCs. We should be working together and forming an alliance, because we all have the same goal. Right. It's to deliver a high quality project on time.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that starting to have having those dialogue, having those conversations, starts to turn that dynamic. And if nothing else, you're adding value to that particular architect, that particular GC that they're going to want to come back and get that isn't common in the marketplace today.
Sure.
Awesome. Is there anything that we didn't touch on, any of these topics that you think is important to share or that you think would be valuable to add?
First thing that comes to mind is I don't have it all figured out. I'm working on it, but I'll never get there. My goal is to be smarter than the person I was a year ago. And that's my same goal year after year.
Yep.
And so far I've been achieving that. But it's work on process. That's one of the most important things. I drive it into my people's heads. I drive it. I really push it to everybody I know, even to my kids. Like my 9-year-old one day, a few weeks ago, said, "You have to trust the process, Dad." And I'm like, "Oh geez, what have I done?" But I was like, "I am so proud of you." Whatever. She gets it. I'm making myself more efficient by emptying the dishwasher, doing it this way. I'm like, cool. That's how I grew up. Was my dad was like, "Set yourself up so you can succeed." It was always working in the shop. How can you be efficient? Like by taking less steps, less steps in a process and less physical steps. So I would start working on that. See how you can take less steps. That's my advice to everybody.
I think that's huge. And I think especially in what we do in manufacturing, it's very low hanging fruit. Everybody loves to talk about lean in the context of the plant, in the context of the shop. But it's very rare that people take that same thought process to the operations, to your business processes, to the office. And hey, how do I take less clicks on my computer? How do I organize my files the same way I organize my boards in the shop? It's all the same thoughts and same ideas that really apply just as well. If not, they have a bigger impact on your business and everything you're doing, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to do in the shop. You can see where your bottlenecks are. You could see where you have to improve. You can see where the messes are.
Right.
It's a lot harder to discover those in the office. We do a decent amount of analysis on our process to identify a bottleneck and then work on it to where it is becoming pretty ingrained in people's heads. Of, okay, they can just find it. They're like laser focused on it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we wrap up, there's 2 questions I like to ask every guest. And I'm interested to get your take on these. The first question, in the millwork industry, what do you see changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, geez. With AI, I think everything. I think estimating is going to become more efficient. I think drafting is going to become more efficient. I think AI is just going to play a huge part. Since I discovered ChatGPT, I use it all the time. I had a 30-minute conversation with ChatGPT yesterday about how to structure something within my business.
Mm-hmm.
And it was insanely valuable. Equipment is equipment. That's going to continue to evolve like it does. But I think estimating is just going to become a powerhouse with what we're going to be able to do with AI. And then having like a virtual assistant through AI, I think is going to boost everybody's productivity. What's going to happen is people with robots are going to replace people without robots.
Right. Yes. I think that's an important dynamic. I don't know if people totally caught what you just said, but I think a lot of people think of AI, they think about automation, and they think about jobs being eliminated. And that's not really the case. If anything, it creates new jobs. Like today, okay, we have automation in the shop today of CNCs, but we have roles that didn't exist before of people that have to program those machines, people that have to engineer things to be able to be cut on those machines. And just what you explained, using AI is not replacing you or replacing estimators, but it's a tool that changes the way we do business. It makes us overall more efficient, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's just increased our capacity.
Yeah. Second question I like to ask everybody, what do you see staying the same?
Probably what we've talked about, the millworker architect dynamic. I don't see that changing too much until it gets in full swing and AI can help those relationships. But I think, unfortunately, that dynamic is going to stay the same.
Yeah. Just due to the sheer stubbornness of millworkers.
Everybody, yeah.
Awesome. I really appreciate you taking time. I appreciate you reaching out first and foremost, and you're being a fan of the podcast and now contributing to make it that much better. People, if they're interested in hearing more about Schlaegle Design Build, talking, connecting with you, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
Email me. My email is casey@schlaegle.com.
Okay. Awesome. Is there any last thoughts or comments you'd like to share?
But yeah, I love this show. I have not really forced, but I told my employees about it. And I have one employee that listens to it nonstop. And I just share it with your friends. This is really cool. It's great what you're doing for the millwork industry. I think this is much needed. It's just great dialogue, and it's really helping elevate all of us.
Awesome. I really appreciate the kind words, and I thank you for taking time to meet with us. I hope to have you on again very soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.